Okay, well, welcome everyone. Thank you for being here, even though we started a bit late. I thought most of the room was here anyway, waiting. Um, that's my fault. I selected the wrong time slot, duration for the time slot. Anyway, welcome. We're here to talk about from Jenkins to GitHub Actions, lessons, problems, and outlook. Um, it is mostly a talk written by Evgeny originally. He already gave the talk at a birthday event. It's slightly updated here and there. So that's why you see Evgeny cross through. He read most of the slides. My name is Ewoud. I'm a long-time Foreman developer. Since 2012, I had patches, and since 2017, I've been working for Red Hat on Satellite, which probably most of you here know. Satellite is based on Foreman, so that's also right now my day job, and I actually can spend some time doing things. So, and you probably see my name somewhere because I'm sort of all over the ecosystem, which I have a broad interest. So what's Foreman? The whole lifecycle thing you know. I don't need to explain all of that. But I think for this part it's important we know that Foreman is a lot of plugins. Foreman plugins itself, but also the Foreman proxy has its own modules providers. We have Hammer plugins, and that results in a lot of tests. And you somehow want to manage this. So that's, I've written a Foreman plugin overview. It's linked in the end as well, where I try to at least summarize sort of all the plugins we have, where they live, etc., to get some overview, because I very often got lost. So if we look at where we were in 2023, we had a Jenkins installation, 142 jobs, and there was also a second Jenkins installation with another 30-ish jobs. And well, it was a bit old. We used the GitHub pull request builder plugin. We technically still do somewhere, but it's been unmaintained for a long time. There are known issues with it. So we had to do something anyway. Other problems, we only gave access to people who were in the Foreman organization or in the Catella organization on GitHub. But others, we know ATEX, they have their own repositories. We have Beta.dots who has something, their DM has their plugins, and they couldn't really use our tooling, and that was not great. And we had some big migration plans at that point. We were going to upgrade to Ruby 3, Webpack 5, these big changes. So we had a motivation to actually improve the whole ecosystem. And I don't know here how many people have used Jenkins in the past, but it had some issues with that. If you look back, basically in 2015, Dominic wrote a lot of that plugin testing in the beginning. There was a discussion in 2021 to use Jenkins files in the repository themselves, but we never really got around to that, and it was mostly unchanged for the better part of a decade. We also had several plugins who already did their own GitHub workflows, and we didn't like that whole everyone does their own thing, and at least I like Unity, like everyone does the same thing in the same way, standardize your workflows, make it easy to reuse, etc. And well, if we look at 2024, we already improved a lot. We got it down to 90 jobs. The second one is untouched. A lot of those jobs are more release workflow oriented, less about CI testing, etc., more about actually how we do packaging, etc. And that's okay. That's for that, Jenkins is actually a good solution. We had already, most Foreman plugins were converted. So yeah, I think we improved a bit. We can actually say, if we look today, we are even better. Like the numbers, one goes down, the other goes up, which is, I think, the good trend. And how do we do that? Well, we have actually a repository on GitHub with a lot of our actions. GitHub has this thing called reusable actions, and you can reuse them, as the name implies, in different repositories. So you just say, here's a workflow definition in one central repository, and in my other repository, I just point it and do this for your CI. We have a few of them, and we'll go through what they do and why they're good. Foreman plugin, the name implies it, it's to test your Foreman plugin. I think every plugin who's in GitHub should use this. It's just the right way to do things. It automatically detects the right Ruby, Node.js, and PostgreSQL versions that are supported by the Foreman versions. I'll show you in a minute how. Basically, it runs a few rig tasks. Everything is test your plugin name, It does seeding tests, so you sort of get the good coverage if you follow the best practices that we have. We can also run migrations because we've noticed in the past that it's quite easy to lose some or to break things with migrations. I'm never a fan of how Rails does their migrations. I think they're always a bit not too well. I'm more a fan of the Django model, but it's different rant. I'll spare you it for now. But we talked earlier about the testing matrix. So what we've done is we have a matrix.json file in the Foreman repository itself, which basically tells you these are the versions you need to support. And we've standardized on Postgres 13. Ruby, you can still see 2.7 and 3.0. Soon I hope to drop 2.7 and add 3.1 and move beyond that. There's a Node.js version. But by centralizing the Foreman itself, the idea is that you just point to the Foreman repository itself, test with this code because you need it already, it's the core version, and you build the whole matrix from that. We wrote a small tool, the GitHub Actions matrix builder, which basically generates a test matrix that we have in the workflow. This makes it very easy to adjust, and I like this a lot. Later on we'll see a bit more how we can actually leverage it even further. So what it comes down to in your Foreman workflow, basically this is what you do. You say, I have a job, which is test, and uses this reusable workflow with my plugin name. Maybe we could get rid of the last part if we sort of do some weird things, but for now, this is the only part you need to modify. Otherwise, you just copy paste example, and it's very minimal. And if we need to make changes to how we test the application, we do it in central workflow, and you can sort of inherit that, and you don't need to maintain it. We will do it for you. I think that was a core design that we had with this to make it easy on plugin developers, because nobody really wants to spend time maintaining CI all the time. You actually want to write your code and make actual improvements. This is a bit more advanced one, because sometimes you actually want to test against multiple versions. So you can actually use the same workflow. This part is the same. The only part that changed is we now add a strategy to it, which says this is actually a matrix build. So you have a matrix of matrix. You point it to the right Foreman version, and this allows you to test on both Foreman develop, but also on a stable version, which is great because most plugins, they support multiple versions at the same time. And that's nice. Another way that you can also use this if you, for example, a lot of Foreman plugins also have a stable branch where they have one branch compatible with 3.13 and develop already moved on. You can just point to the right Foreman version and do your testing that way and still have your whole CI work. This is something we didn't have with Jenkins and is actually a great feature that I like a lot. And that whole Foreman version trick, we can also do another thing with it. You can actually point to a pull request in Foreman core, which is actually very nice. When we talked earlier, we had the big plans to update to a new Ruby version, to a new Webpack version, the Rails upgrade, all those kinds of things where you're making a change in Foreman core itself, but then you want to verify with your own plugin if it still works. What you do, you can actually, GitHub has internal references to pull requests, which is refs pull whatever head, and that's basically also Git knows about that. So we can just say, well, that pull request, that's the version I want to test with. So typically the workflow, for example, with recently the Rails 7 upgrade, we do a pull request in core that updates to Rails 7, and then we go through every plugin and just point it to that PR, that CI run, and we know sort of if it works or breaks, and then you can sort of iterate, and before you actually merge the whole thing, you know already how it's going to look like. I think this is a very good feature that, again, we didn't have with Jenkins before, and we've already used this quite extensively, and I'm so happy we have this. It makes our lives so much easier. Yeah, another thing that I really like, we actually have CI on our CI. So in the Actions repository itself, we actually have a workflow that runs the workflow that's in the PR itself. So you can actually see if I make a PR to this workflow, and will it break the whole world or will it still work? Again, something we didn't have with Jenkins, but it is very nice. There's a small thing like at the top. You can say only do it if we change the workflow itself, because we have multiple workflows, just a bit cheaper. Yeah, basically reuse it. And this is a trick. It says here Foreman plugin. Obviously, we've done this with the different workflows over all of them. But that's basically the first workflow. We have more of them. There's another one for just JavaScript testing. The reason we separated this out is a lot of our plugins, they have some triggers that are special, which say only if you change something in the JavaScript files run this. That's why we separated it out. But again, it's a standard workflow. Again, it reuses that matrix building that we have. So let's say you change it to a new Node.js version in core. You can use the same trick with point to a PR and test it out and try out your changes. That is to me still excellent. But not everything is a Foreman plugin. We also have a test gem, which basically it's supposed to test a gem. It's a bit different. We don't have that whole matrix or JSON approach because that's not really relevant. What we did here actually is in a gem spec file, you can say I'm compatible with these Ruby versions. And from that, you can build the matrix. So we clone the repository, inspect the gem spec, build the matrix again, and then run some command to test it. And you can use this on any gem. But also Foreman plugins and Foreman proxy plugins, they're all basically gems, which is what we sort of use. And yeah, I use this in some places. We don't use it that much yet. We really did an effort to push all Foreman plugins. This is not something we've really pushed for. This is also something you could use outside of a project, because if any gem can use this. Now, one improvement we made since last time, you might have seen it on the previous slide. I said Foreman plugins, Foreman proxy plugins. We actually created a separate workflow that's much more tailored to that. It actually calls the test gem workflow, but it adds one more step to it. We also added a matrix.json file to the smart proxy itself, and we added another step that even though we test gem, we test all the different Ruby versions, we will also verify that the versions we expect are there. You can't say I'm not going to support Ruby 3.0 in my smart proxy plugin if the former developed version is supposed to support that. So this is what every smart proxy plugin should use. Conceptually, it's exactly the same as the Foreman plugin, just a bit more tailored to that. We have a repository here. Basically, internally, we have, again, some small reusable action that verifies the matrix is compatible. In the end, I'll link to that repository. Another common action, Rubocop. This is what we very often use as a prerequisite before we start the whole complex, expensive build. Just run Rubocop. If that fails, well, there's no point in testing everything else. So many workflows, they simply say, run Rubocop, and then the test suite itself needs Rubocop. And you can compose your actions. Gem release, this is one that I think is a bit more nuanced. I think it's a good step, but this is what it does is essentially it does a gem build, whatever, if a tag is created, and then it pushes that to Ruby gems. The downside is you need an API key, and I think it's less secure. So even though we use it in some places here, it's not really where I want to go. I didn't link it, but I opened an RFC to use trusted publishers, which is where I would like to go. With trusted publishers, you actually have a verified workflow, and on Ruby gems you can actually see this GitHub workflow created this release. So I should have added a link to that RFC, but this one area I think will still improve a bit more on it. But where I would like to end up is as a plugin author, you create a tag, you push it, CI is triggered, it pushes to Ruby gems, and then ideally speaking also we open a packaging PR to automatically already do all that work that you would normally do manually. That last part is still some to do, but really high on my wish list. So some of the changes, like this, I didn't update the date here because it was back then the reflection, but I think we're still here. We don't have the test catalog comments anymore. It's listed as a bad thing here. It's also a good thing. It's less noise on the PR itself. But the bad thing is that in the past, there were a lot more people who could re-trigger the tests. Now it's limited to only people who actually have write access, so that's a bit limiting. Technically, as an author, you can just push it again, but that part is a bit not as nice. And I think the last one is that I feel personally with Jenkins, you had this. You can create some XUnit XML file, get a nice report of the whole test suite, what passed and what failed. In GitHub Actions, you don't really have that feature as far as I know. So you always end up reading through a lot of text, find that error, and I think that workflow is not really nice. Some tasks do support GitHub annotations, and you see it in the test files, but it's not always obvious to everyone. And I think this is an area, when it fails, how do you then resolve it? I think that's an area we can still improve a lot on. If people have thoughts on it, I would love to hear them. But I think that's still a sort of bad thing we can, improve on. So some things we would like still to do. This is a slide that was taken from Evgeny and modified, because this one actually we got it done. We migrated all the smart proxy plugins. That's actually now all resolved. But we still need to get rid of the second Jenkins. So I may have skipped over it pretty quickly, but we still we have one Jenkins to do our packaging, but then we have another one at CentOS CI that's run by them as well, because we use CentOS CI to the actual pipeline testing. The reason it was separate is that they have this internal API called Duffy that was only accessible from their own internal network, and we needed this whole Jenkins for that. They actually made the API accessible outside of their network now, so we could just integrate into our own Jenkins and get rid of the second one and remove all the indirection, because indirection is annoying. You need to go to that old server, see the results, and all the tediousness. Nobody likes that, and that would be nice. Another aspect that we would like to improve on is if you run a test suite for a plugin, you are just running your own tests. But what we also know is that some tests in core, you might want to run them because you might regress them. But we don't have a good mechanism to do it today. But it would be very, very nice if you could almost all do regression testing. Like we mentioned earlier, if you upgrade Rails, maybe your plugin does some weird extension that actually breaks something in core that you didn't know about. So maybe we want to run these core tests as well. That's something that's on the to-do list. And Hammer plugin testing. I think we should do the same thing we sort of did for the Foreman proxy with Hammer. We just haven't gotten around to it. We also talked about this, maybe get rid of Jenkins altogether, like have multiple CI systems. It's not great, but the biggest downside is GitHub is bad for storing artifacts. Like the thing we use for Jenkins for packaging today is it provides us a constant URL where we can always get the latest tarball. So when we build a nightly, what we do is we run the test suite, we build a tarball, it stores at a dedicated location, and then in our packaging places where we build nightlies, we just point to Jenkins and let's give me the latest stable tarball. With GitHub, the URLs are not stable, they always change. So you need a lot more complex logic. Not something we know a solution to. So another one, time triggered jobs. Jenkins is very good at keeping to a schedule. The downside with GitHub Actions is that if you don't push anything to a repository for more than, I think, 2 months, it disables the cron job, which is really annoying.
Which also disables the artifacts.
Only if they're in the same workflow, which we used to have. So cron jobs in GitHub Actions, they're not so great. Yeah?
They're not on the enterprise, not necessarily GitHub Enterprise.
I've never used GitHub Enterprise, but the comment was that in GitHub Enterprise it might be different. Maybe that's one, but we don't use that, so but yeah, those are some reasons. We might want to get rid of Jenkins, but I think for now we can't really do it altogether. But we've improved. Another one, do we actually want to do the same thing for GitLab? ATX, Red Hat, we use GitLab internally. Could we do the same thing and make it reusable, not reinvent the wheel? I would love to. I'm not sure we have the time to do it, but any PR is welcome, and please talk to us if you have some ideas with that. But yeah, that's what I wanted to share. That's my my talk. Are there any questions? Yeah. Sorry. Try to get the microphone so it's recorded for.
Do you use self-hosted GitHub runners?
No, we don't use self-hosted. I had it in my notes somewhere. Oh. Okay. Okay, so in case it wasn't clear in the recording, the question is, do we use self-hosted runners or not? We don't. I had in my notes somewhere to mention that we are sponsored by GitHub. We have a plan that's higher than the default. We get more runners than standard. We're happy to have that because we're an open source project. They were happy to do it for us. I can imagine other organizations might not have that. So no, we're good with the standard runners. For us, I don't think we run into problems yet. And if we do, we might just say, please GitHub, help, give us more. I know that Foxapuli, for example, has an even higher limit than we have, and they were happy to give that. No. Any other questions?
We are allowed to reuse the workflows, correct?
That's actually encouraged, not.
You're supposed to.
Yeah. I'm getting in steps again.
So since we're supposed to reuse these workflows for our own plugins, do you have plans to also supply some example configuration that we can use if we don't use GitHub runners? Like for instance, all our plugins are developed on GitLab instead.
Well, that's sort of the that action item. Patches welcome.
And I guess there is a project, ACT, where you can run GitHub style workflows on not GitHub, which I think, for example, ForkJoe, like the GitHub fork uses. So this might actually work. I've never tried it, but there's a rabbit hole for you now.
Yeah, I should probably add ACT at the end, but any other questions? Okay, well, thank you.